vairagya vidya nija bhakti yoga shikshartamekam purusha parana Shri Krishna Caitanya Sharira Dhari Kripam Buddhir Param Padye Kalam Nashtam Nijam Bhakti Yogam Ja Pradishkartam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nama Avirbhutas Tasya Padara Vinde Gadam Gadam Liyatam Chittavringa Ajanulambita Bujo Kanakavadato Samkirtanaika Pitaro Kamalaya Taksho Vishwambaro Dvijabaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priya Karo Karunavataro Vande Nanjabaja Shrinam Padarinam Abhiksha Shayasam Harikatoki Tam Munati Bhavanatrayam. We're continuing our reading of the Sri Caitanya Charitamrita. Welcome back, everybody. We're broadcasting live from the Bhaktivedanta studios at Govardhana, and we're taking up at the Madhya Lila chapter 19. The Lord instructs Srila Rupa Goswami at text number 118. In his book Caitanya Chandrodaya, Kavi Karnapur, the son of Shivananda Sain, has elaborately described the meeting between Sri Rupa Goswami and Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. And it goes as follows. In the course of time, the transcendental news of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan was almost lost. To enunciate explicitly those transcendental pastimes, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu empowered Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami with the nectar of his mercy to carry out this work in Vrindavan. This verse and the following two verses are from Act 9, 38, 29, 30 of Caitanya Chandrodaya by Sri Kavi Karnapur. From the very beginning, Srila Rupa Goswami was deeply attracted by the transcendental qualities of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Thus he was permanently relieved from family life. Srila Rupa Goswami and his younger brother Ballabha were blessed by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Although the Lord was transcendentally situated in his transcendental eternal form at Prayag, he told Rupa Goswami about transcendental ecstatic love of Krishna. The Lord then embraced him very fondly and bestowed all his mercy on him. Indeed, Srila Rupa Goswami, whose dear friend was Swarup Damodar, was the exact replica of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, and he was very, very dear to the Lord. Being the embodiment of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's ecstatic love, Rupa Goswami was naturally very beautiful. He very carefully followed the principles enunciated by the Lord, and he was a competent person to explain properly the pastimes of Lord Krishna. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu expanded his mercy to Srila Rupa Goswami just so he could render service by writing transcendental literatures. The characteristics of Srila Rupa Goswami have thus been described in various places by the poet Kavi Karnapur. An account has also been given of how Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu bestowed his causeless mercy upon Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatana Goswami. Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami were the objects of love and honor for all the great stalwart devotees of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. If someone returned to his country after seeing Vrindavan, the associates of the Lord would ask him questions. They would ask those returning from Vrindavan, how are Rupa and Sanatana doing in Vrindavan? What are their activities in the renounced order? How do they manage to eat? These were the questions asked. The Lord's associates would also ask, how is it that Rupa and Sanatana are engaging in devotional service 24 hours a day? At that time, the person who had returned from Vrindavan would praise Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. The brothers actually have no fixed residence. They reside beneath trees, one night under one tree and the next night under another. Srila Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis beg a little food from the houses of brahmanas. Giving up all kinds of material enjoyment, They take only some dry bread and fried chickpeas. They carry only water pots, and they wear torn quilts. They always chant the holy names of Krishna and discuss his pastimes. In great jubilation, they also dance. They engage almost 24 hours daily in rendering service to the Lord. They usually sleep only an hour and a half, and some days, when they continuously chant the Lord's holy name, they do not sleep at all. Sometimes they write transcendental literatures about devotional service, and sometimes they hear about Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and spend their time thinking about the Lord. When the personal associates of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu would hear of the activities of Srila Rupa Goswamis, they would say, "What is wonderful for a person who has been granted the Lord's mercy." Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami had no fixed residence. They stayed beneath a tree for one day only and wrote huge volumes of transcendental literature. They not only wrote books but chanted, danced, discussed Krishna, and remembered Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. Thus they executed devotional service. In Vrindavan there are Prakrita Sahajas who say that writing books or even touching books is taboo. For them, devotional service means being relieved from these activities. Whenever they are asked to hear a recitation of Vedic literature, they refuse, saying, "What business do we have reading or hearing transcendental literatures?" They are meant for neophytes. They pose themselves as too elevated to exert energy for reading, writing, and hearing. However, pure devotees, under the guidance of Srila Rupa Goswami, reject this Sahaja philosophy. It is certainly not good to write literature for money or reputation, but to write books and publish them for the enlightenment of the general populace is real service to the Lord. This was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's opinion, and he specifically told his disciples to write books. He actually preferred to publish books rather than establish temples. Temple construction is meant for the general populace and neophyte devotees, but the business of advanced and empowered devotees is to write books, publish them, and distribute them widely. According to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, distributing literature is like playing on a great mridanga. Consequently, we always request members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness to publish as many books as possible and distribute them widely throughout the world. By thus following the footsteps of Srila Rupa Goswami, one can become a Rupanuga devotee. Srila Rupa Goswami has personally spoken about the mercy of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu in his auspicious introduction to his book Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Although I am the lowest of men, I have known and have no knowledge. The inspiration to write transcendental literature about devotional service has been mercifully bestowed upon me. Therefore, I am offering my obeisances at the lotus feet of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has given me a chance to write these books. For 10 days, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu stayed at Prayag and instructed Rupa Goswami, empowering him with the necessary potency. This is a confirmation of the statement, Krishna Shakti Vina Nahe Tar Pravartana. Unless one is specifically empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he cannot spread the Krishna consciousness movement. An empowered devotee sees and feels himself to be the lowest of men, for he knows that whatever he does is due to the inspiration given by the Lord in the heart. This is confirmed. It's got curry leaves. I think it's time for lunch. An empowered devotee sees and feels himself to be the lowest of men, for he knows that whatever he does is due to the inspiration given by the Lord in the heart. This is confirmed by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam tadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. To be empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one has to qualify himself. This means that one must engage 24 hours a day, 24 hours daily in the loving devotional service of the Lord. The material position of a devotee doesn't matter because devotional service is not dependent on material considerations. In his earlier life, Srila Rupa Goswami was a government officer and a grihasta. He was not even a brahmachari or sannyasi. He associated with mlechas and yavanas. But because he was always eager to serve, he was a qualified recipient for the Lord's mercy. A sincere devotee can therefore be empowered by the Lord regardless of his situation. In the preceding verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami has described how he was personally empowered by the Lord. He further states in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Ihayasya harer dasye karmana manasa gira nikilasyapyavastastu jivan mukta sauchite. A person acting in the service of Krishna with his body, mind, and words is a liberated person, even in the material world, although he may be engaged in many so-called material activities. To keep oneself free from material contamination and attain the Lord's favor, one must be sincerely eager to render service to the Lord. This is the only qualification necessary. As soon as one is favored by the mercy of the spiritual master and the Lord, one is immediately given all the power necessary to write books and propagate the Krishna consciousness movement without being hampered by material considerations. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu said, "My dear Rupa, please listen to me. It is not possible to describe devotional service completely. Therefore, I'm just trying to give you a synopsis of the symptoms of devotional service." The ocean of transcendental mellows of devotional service is so big that no one can estimate its length and breadth. However, just to help you taste it, I'm describing but one drop. In this universe, there are limitless living entities in 8,400,000 species, and all are wandering within this universe. This is a challenge to so-called scientists and philosophers who presume that there are living entities on this planet only. So-called scientists are going to the moon, and they say there is no life there. This does not tally with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's version. He says that everywhere within the universe there are unlimited numbers of living entities in 8,400,000 different forms. In the Bhagavad Gita 2.24, we find that the living entities are sarvakata, which means that they can go anywhere. This indicates that there are living entities everywhere. They exist on land, in water, in air, in fire, and in ether. Thus, there are living entities in all types of material elements. Since the entire material universe is composed of material elements, they exist everywhere. Thus, there are living entities in all types of material elements. Since the entire material universe is composed of 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, why should there be living entities on one planet and not another, and not others? Such a foolish version can never be accepted by Vedic students. From the Vedic literatures, we understand that there are living entities on each and every planet, regardless of whether the planet is composed of earth, water, fire, air, or air. These living entities may not have the same forms that are found on this planet Earth, but they have different forms composed of different elements. Even on this earth, we can see that the forms of land animals are different from the forms of aquatics. According to the circumstances, life conditions differ, but undoubtedly there are living entities everywhere. Why should we deny the existence of living entities on this or that planet? Those who have claimed to have gone to the moon have not gone there, or else with their imperfect vision, they cannot actually perceive the particular type of living entities there. The living entities are described as ananta, or unlimited. Nonetheless, they are said to belong to 8,400,000 species. As stated in the Vishnu Purana, Jalaja navalakshani stavara lakshavimshiti krimayo drudra sankhya ka pakshinam dashalakshanam trimshal lakshani pashavaha chatur lakshani manushaha. There are 900,000 species living in the water. There are also 2 million non-moving living entities, stavara, such as trees and plants. There are also 1,100,000 species of insects and reptiles, and there are 1 million species of birds. As far as quadrupeds are concerned, there are 3 million varieties. And there are 400,000 human species. Some of these species may exist on one planet and not on another, but in any case, within all the planets of the universe, and even in the sun, there are living entities. This is the verdict of the Vedic literatures. As the Bhagavad Gita 2.20 confirms, Najayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavitadva nabhuya ajo nitya shashvato yam purano nahanyate hanyamane sharire. For the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. Since the living entities are never annihilated, they simply transmigrate from one life form to another. Thus, there is an evolution of forms according to the degree of developed consciousness. One experiences different degrees of consciousness in different forms. A dog's consciousness is different from a man's. Even within a species, we find that a father's consciousness is different from his son's, and that of a child's consciousness is different from a youth's. Just as we find different forms, we find different states of consciousness. When we see different states of consciousness, we may take it for granted that the bodies are different. In other words, different types of bodies depend on different states of consciousness. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Yang vapi smaran bhavam tatatante kalevaram tam tame vaiti konteya saratad bhava bhavita. One's consciousness at the time of death determines one's type of body in the next life. This is the process of transmigration of the soul. A variety of bodies is already there. We change from one body to another in terms of our consciousness. The length and breadth of the living entity is described as 1/10,000th the part of the tip of the hair. This is the original subtle nature of the living entity. Kesha grashatabhagasya shatamsha sadrishatmakaha jiva sukshma swarupo yam sankatito hi chitkana. If we divide the tip of a hair into 100 parts, and then take one of these parts and divide it again into 100 parts, that very fine division is the size of but one of the numberless living entities. They are all chitkana, particles of spirit, not matter. This is quoted from the commentary on the portion of Srimad Bhagavatam wherein the Vedas personified offer their obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna confirms this statement in the Bhagavad Gita 15.7, Mamai Vamsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Lord Sri Krishna personally identifies himself with the minute living entities. Lord Krishna is the Supreme Spirit, the Super Soul, and the living entities are his very minute parts and parcels. Of course, we cannot divide the tip of a hair into such fine particles, but spiritually such small particles can exist. Spiritual strength is so powerful that a mere atomic portion of spirit can be the biggest brain in the material world. The same spiritual spark is within an ant and within the body of Brahma. According to his karma, material activities, the spiritual spark attains a certain type of body. Material activities are carried out in goodness, passion, and ignorance, or a combination of these. According to the mixture of the modes of material nature, the living entity is awarded a particular type of body. This is the conclusion. We'll take a few reflections or questions. Yes, Kana Gopal.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So we're reading here that we are chit kana, particles of spirit, not matter. How does this relate to our spiritual form, in terms of this saying we're like a spiritual particle, and it's described that our spiritual form has a body, spiritual senses. How do those two relate?
Right, that particle is not impersonal. And it is, Prabhupada describes it in a couple of places when he's specifically asked about that, about how, well, one of the things he talks about is how he says we have from the soul manifest the body, because it's according to our consciousness. And then we find that, he says, we have this form right now because there's a subtle form behind it, and it has shape because the subtle body has shape. It's like a glove fitting over, therefore it has that. And he mentions that the soul also has a spiritual form, just as we have form now, that we're never formless, and that's dependent on our specific means of worshiping Krishna. So that becomes manifest, or it's an evolution of the soul. In that, we find in Bhagavatamrita that those who are coming in and out of Vaikuntha have variegated forms, and they're all spiritual. Some of them look just like Lord Narayan, so much so that Gopakumar, when he sees certain devotees coming in and out who have attained the liberation where they have an identical body as the Lord, Sarupi Mukti, he says, "Oh my Lord," and they say, no, not me, I'm a servant. But there are myriad other forms that we see there, he sees there because of their specific relationship with Krishna. So they assume that form to serve Krishna in a certain way, or because they've meditated on that form, they assume that form.
I met one Indian man, he said, I don't want to exist. I'm forced to, I don't, if I don't surrender, then I suffer, so where's the free will? So I didn't know what to say to him.
Well, many of these proclamations, as Krishna says, are due to psychological anomalies. And people say things that are logical fallacies. For instance, why can't God make the material world the spiritual world? And in philosophy and logic, this is like saying, why can't a triangle be a square? Because, and it's an absurd proposition. There are tattvas, there are states of being that exist that you can point to. So there are squares and there are triangles, and you say, why can't a triangle be a square? Then you're not having a conversation. You're not even speaking in a way that can be entertained, because it's illogical. It's a fallacy. So to say that I exist, I don't want to exist, is also like saying, why can't a square become a triangle? However, Krishna does fulfill the desire of somebody who wants that to a certain degree. For instance, Buddhists want to become void so they can take on the body of a stone, Prabhupada says. And they can live as a stone. And of course impersonalists want to merge, and they can do that. But it's not permanent. I mean, in eternity, there's a natural tendency of the soul for enjoyment, because it's there in Krishna, we're parts of him. So he may fall out of that, whatever non-activity is there, supposed non-activity for some time, or whatever equilibrium he achieves beyond the movement caused by the modes of material nature. Arui Krishna Parampadam Tata. But Tantyado, again, he'll fall back down again, being attracted by activity. Devavrata.
There's a verse in the 11th canto which speaks about this type of mentality. Can I read it?
Yeah.
Atma parigyanam mayo vivado hiyastiti nastiti vyartha nishta vyarthapi naivo paramate mapumsam mata paradritta diyam swalokat. The speculative argument of philosophers, this world is real, no it is not real, is based upon incomplete knowledge of the Supreme Soul and is simply aimed at understanding material dualities. Although such argument is useless, persons who have turned their attention away from me, their own true self, are unable to give it up.
That goes for many other kinds of argument as well, in which there's no conclusion. We talked about it maybe at the beginning of the readings, the origin of the jiva and so forth, speculating about those things that have no conclusion within the mind. Krishna considers them useless, therefore Krishna advocates for the Stita Dhir Muni, who simply accepts Krishna's version and moves on. The other reflections or questions? Perhaps we'll look to the outside people's party. How's everybody out there? If we look out there, we just see perfected living beings, living in a state of bliss and perfection. Individual existence, but only thinking of Krishna and absorbed in hearing and chanting. It's quite a realm you live in out there. We can observe it from here. Gopinath?
Hare Krishna. A few purports back, it was just mentioned that Rupa Goswami was not in the Brahmachari ashram or sannyas ashram, and it said he was a grahastha. I've never heard that he was married or had a family. I just want to clarify on that point.
Yeah, it took him a year to be able to divest himself of his assets and move on to join Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. It may sound from the story and the way it's truncated that he just saw Caitanya Mahaprabhu and then walked off, but there's more to the history. 1 year it took him. Of course, that's even a short amount of time. Kanana Maharaj talks about, he gave a class in Vrindavan or Mayapur, and he talked about how he wanted to take sannyas, and then it took him 2-3 years in order to go back to work and earn enough money so he could buy his wife a house, so he could take sannyas. So it's disentangling oneself from the practical aspects of the material world is onerous. So is dying, by the way, because when somebody dies, it takes years to tie up the loose ends from even one person's life, financially, socially. All their assets have to be liquidated. It can take years. Living beings are somewhat consequential because they're part of Krishna. Okay, what else?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I just related to the topic of desire of to not exist. So just remind me in the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, in his commentary to this Baladev Vidyabhushana, he's saying an example. So he's saying, usually we hear that it's very difficult, like in Bhagavad Gita, Klishodika Tarastisham Avyakta Sakta Chetasam. But he's saying it's quite easy. He gives a wonderful example. Like if you take a salt and you put the water in the salt, and then it's disappeared. Similarly, he gives he gives an example of understanding of the Bhagavan as an example of the milk, like the milk have a taste, have a color, and after taking the milk one definitely experiences Ananda. So he compared these two examples, and yeah.
So let me make sure I got the analogies correctly in order. The salt and the water is a kind of merging.
Yeah.
And it's easy because all of a sudden you just don't see the salt anymore.
Yeah, but one can taste this.
But you
salt.
can taste it. So what does that mean?
So he was just comparing this Brahman existence. So desire to be not existent, but at the same time it's not possible. So he gives an example of the salt.
So you can still taste it, even though it looks like it. See, it's gone. You're gone, and then it's like, no, still there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And what about the milk?
The milk contains three aspects, like it have a color, it have a taste, and one can experience Ananda.
And that means, and that's analogous with?
Realization of Bhagavan.
Right. Yeah, I remember that example. This is fantastic.
Hare Krishna.
What a great contribution. You wait to spring at the right times and then get a sixer. Okay. Yeah. We got more from outside People's Party.
Just a quick one. I just found it interesting that Caitanya Mahaprabhu started off his conversation with Rupa Goswami basically the same way he did with Arjuna, talking about the soul.
Nice. Yeah. Start at the beginning, right? Fantastic. Mukadavind, we have inside People's Party. But no more microphone. It got dissolved. We lost what? We lost funding for our audio here. Not enough contributions from...
Maharaj, one thing I noticed that specifically you take you took this section for even for the new people in the Friday program teachings of the Golden Monk, and you took them to each of these concepts. So can you please elaborate, like, what is the importance of this section, especially the Rupa Siksha that...
Well, people have never heard this before. People have no idea that they're not their body. Nobody talks about it. Everyone says, you are your body, you are your body, you are your body. That's the main mantra. And you better look sharp while you're doing it too. Otherwise you'll be left out and no one will love you anymore. And people are in a panic to try to maintain their material body and try to live forever. That's the new thing. If you just exercise enough and eat the right diet, then you don't die. So when we do programs at Salesforce, did one just before we left. We actually go in the building, and for some of the programs I've brought my Changing Bodies exhibit. Get out of the car, they drop me off on the sidewalk there, and I walk in this huge building, corporate fancy place, and I'm carrying in my arms the Changing Bodies. I don't get across the lobby without somebody walking past me and then circling back around. It happens every time. And they come back and they go, excuse me, do you mind if I ask you a question? I'm like, no, go ahead. I was like, what is it? And I said, what do you think it is? And they go, oh my God. And they get on the elevator and there's 7 people in there and they break off their conversation and they all start looking and it's like, hey Larry, what do you think it is? And it's, oh my God. Just the concept of the fact that the body's changing and the soul stays the same, and that there's an end period. They don't look for the end, or they don't think about it. It's taboo to think about it. Then it catches people's attention and they think it's something extraordinary. So when I was talking about some of those things, going through systematically Rupa Goswami's teachings and trying to present them to in a modern context, I found people were fascinated by them. They couldn't get enough of the you're not your body type of presentation. They liked it a lot. Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Yeah. Gopal.
It's been very nice appreciating this section, because earlier in the year I had the opportunity to visit this actual Dashramedha Ghat area.
Oh.
And Jai Vijay Prabhu from Padayatra, India took a small group of devotees, and we got to go and visit
Jai
that
Vijay,
area.
the author?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And some devotees from Mayapur, I think Jayapataka Maharaj's disciples, have installed Mahaprabhu's feet just behind Dashramedha Ghat, up in a Shiva temple. Oh, that's Bhaktisiddhanta? Okay, so then some other devotees put a plaque up with sections of this part of Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Did you like it there?
It was a very visual experience, sitting there and trying to visualize this pastime.
Wow.
So if anyone gets a chance, it's not so far away from the...
Maybe we could hold a
Dashramedha
reading
Ghat.
there next time.
Oh yeah, Chutamohan was the
Chutamohan. Well, can we have the reading right on the Dashramedha Ghat? Okay, last one from Ekachakra.
There's this one purport where Prabhupada talks about writing and publishing books and how his Guru Maharaj preferred it to building temples, called it the Brihat Mridanga, and requested all the members of the society to publish and distribute as many books as possible all around the world. I was wondering, in your opinion, how can we bring this teaching into reality and put our priorities, how can we prioritize this teaching here and now?
Well, one thing is to write, because if you don't write, you won't have any books. And Prabhupada encouraged devotees to write in order to consolidate their realizations. And one place he encouraged people to write was in the Bhakti Guided magazine. And to be able to put together a compelling article that catches the attention and has philosophical points, is quite an art. In fact, Narangi Devi Dasi was just here with Nagar Chandra. She's a pretty good writer. She gave me a book. Now, she's been published in the BTG 2 or 3 times, and her articles have been really well accepted. As they're very topical, she thinks in terms of how it would affect a Western audience. I have the book she gave me in the back. It's a compendium of her writings and her articles. And that's a good example of what Prabhupada specifically encouraged. And then, of course, there was Swarup Damodar, who is an expert in his field of biology, if that was his field. And he wrote a book, The Scientific Basis of Krishna Consciousness, which became a niche book and something that Prabhupada liked. He saw a need for us to speak on scientific terms and challenge the status quo. And that's what the book did. For instance, he talked about experiments that have been done scientifically to show how life comes from life. The crook neck, I forget, there's a kind of test tube that has a crook neck in it, and there's a famous experiment that shows unless organic material with life in it was put into that area, it doesn't manifest into anything. They did double-blind studies to show essentially that unless you have a living cell to start with, it's not going to create anything. And he had that and many other kinds of presentations in his book that Prabhupada found were relevant to the audience, and so he did that. In the BBT, there's a vetting process. First of all, is there a desire to distribute it? I mean, Mayank, one of our team members from BBT, we asked him to take a course at Stanford, or maybe he just found the course and said, should I take it? And we said, yeah. It was about publishing. And they said in that course, the first thing is how are you going to market it? You should ask that before you write the book. Because lots of people write books, and then they sit in people's garages and they hand them out to a few devotees and it doesn't really go anywhere. So you have to have a plan. It means that in order to get it distributed, there has to be a pipeline. And if you can figure out your own means, some people do that through Torchlight and other publishers, or nowadays it's so easy to self-publish. If someone figures out how to make a pipeline to distribute it to others, then that could be reasonable. Through the BBT, there actually has to be a market for it. Like people say, the divisional heads would say before they would pay for a book to be printed in mass quantity, they would say, well, who's going to sell it? Or any of the entities, the temples, the community is going to buy it. And therefore, if they are, they take it. But even before that, there's a vetting process. There's a panel of educated people who are writers, and I don't even know who they are because they keep them secret. But they go through the various manuscripts that are presented to see even if they're substantial enough to start considering marketing at all. And most of them don't make it because writing a book, putting it all together so the transitions are there and it catches people's interest and it's relevant, it hasn't already been done before, that's a big issue. Because writing a book's like building a house. You got to have a little carpentry still, plus you have to have a whole crew to help put it together. Then there's the issue of not wanting to eclipse Prabhupada's books. So certain kinds of books, there's a trepidation that if we get too many books coming through the BBT, for instance, or devotees dilute the books that we're distributing of Prabhupada's books on Sankirtan, then the ratio will change, and pretty soon there'll be fewer Prabhupada's books and more of the other kinds of books. So those are considerations also as far as how many you're going to print and how many you're going to let in. And a lot of those issues aren't completely resolved because on one side of the spectrum, some people say there shouldn't be any books besides Prabhupada, and other people say it actually glorifies Prabhupada to see that there are people who came after Prabhupada who can write comprehensively in such a way that it'll attract people's attention. And then you have to contend with that in getting a book through. And so there's that issue. Then there's the AI issue, because as you know, well, because you're an expert in it, you could take the Bhagavad Gita as it is and then tell AI. You can sit there for 5 minutes and give all these instructions and tell AI, make it like, take the manuscript, make it like this, like that, and the other thing, so it's more appealing to the modern audience. And then AI will go, what a great question. Can I print the book for you and bring it to your house? And then and then you got that. But then there are other issues that everyone in the world is dealing with now, as far as the ethics of that, of taking somebody else's book and changing it like that, or what speak of using AI at all to write. That's like, did you write it or did somebody else write it? So it's a complex issue, but to simplify it, if you write for self-purification and you get going with a genre, like I can see with Narangi, she's developing her genre so that she's preaching to meaningful articles to actually catch people's attention. She had enough of them to put into a book. Now, how that book's going to get marketed, I mean, she gave me one, but who knows, does she have a master plan? So there are a lot of elements that come together in the consideration of publishing a book, especially if you're a member of ISKCON. And if you do it separately, that can be done also, as long as you don't use any copyrights of somebody else, especially Prabhupada's books, that you have to have permission for. But then you could try to sell it using social media or whatever. Yogeshwar Prabhu is a great writer, high class, very highly educated person, and he's written several books, and his point is that there's a big difference between selling books and distributing books. The ones we distribute, we give out to, say we print something, 80,000 copies. Devamrita Swami's book is in 500,000 now. They go out to centers all over the world, and people take them out, put them on the table. Vijay will sell a couple hundred in a week. Whatever it is, it's because Vijay's there, the book's going out. The guy gets called over, he walks over and he meets Vijay, and he's like, yeah, I'll take it, because there's an affable person with charisma there selling it. So that's different from people saying, I'm going to go on Amazon and buy this book because it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to read something like this. And if you could sell 40,000 books on the internet through Amazon by advertising, which is also a big deal, because when you go through a publishing house, there's an arduous process where you have to go around and advertise. You have to go on talk shows, and people don't buy from first-time authors anyway very much. You have to be well established, and to get well established, you got to get the bite on the apple somewhere. And if you get a lucky break, maybe you can make it in. But otherwise, it's a hard slog, and you end up with a few thousand here or there, and it's like, okay. Those who are professional writers recommend, like, what's her name, wrote the book Bird by Bird? Anne Lamott. She talks about how she was a writing teacher, and she says, first thing her students in university say is like, I want to write a bestseller. How do I do it? And she said, forget it, first of all. Don't think of writing like that, and go back to square one. Think of what Prabhupada said, write for your own purification. Because when you write something, especially a book, then you become an expert in it, and write to consolidate your thoughts. If you can make it available to people afterwards, you find a niche where it's really going to help, then you're extra lucky. But most people, 99% of the books that get published generally don't have that kind of curb appeal or well thought up enough to market it to the wider audience. Those just off the top of my head are a few of the topics, but there are plenty more of them, and it's a very fascinating area to discuss, and it's relevant, obviously, to the purport that was just there. And just a final thing, as far as the tenor of the conversation, the ideas behind it. I had long conversations with Rādhikā Ramaṇa Prabhu when we stayed with him when Sādhu Saṅga was in Utah, which apparently is the new pronunciation I heard this morning. You're from Utah. No, just the devotee who the sweet devotee who read and welcomed Ballabhachandra this morning, said he was from Utah. But Rādhikā was saying, it's the glory of a person, and it makes them more glorified when those after them, first of all, choose to write about the materials following, that luminary. He gave the example of Shakespeare. How many thesis papers have there been in the humanities department about any of Shakespeare's works or his life in general? Millions. And did that eclipse Shakespeare's writings? No, on the contrary, it's a light shining on them, saying, wow, so many people are writing about him and taking points from his writings that he must be like the super guy, and he is in literary history. So his point was, after every ācārya, there's always thousands of commentaries. We only see a few of them, but there are thousands of writings about any luminary, any of the mahātmās who have written, and so forth. And it glorifies them because, of course, that person made a stir. They hit a nerve. They actually had something potent to say, and therefore there's a lot more to say about it, and a lot more to churn within what they said. And therefore his opinion was, and is, that it's the glory of Prabhupada that more people write about what he said and what he brought to bear, the whole canon of Vedic literatures, and how we can bring it into the modern light so that people can take advantage of it, that shows Prabhupada's potency. And case in point was the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, because Joseph T. O'Connell, who at the time was the preeminent Vedic scholar or expert on Gaudiya Vaishnavism in the academic world. And if you read his foreword to the book, he says that very thing, that nobody in the world up to this point, after hundreds of years, has been able to do what Gopi Puranatanda Prabhu has done, which is to effectively translate what Sanatana Goswami wrote as prose, as commentary. He wrote it in Sanskrit, and nobody had been able to take it and put it into a natural flow of language that people could read and understand. And he said it's perfectly done. He said only those who are followers of his divine... He said this points to the greatness of his divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, that he could attract and then train disciples who could do that. What to speak of how that the devotees headed by Hridayananda Maharaj were able to finish the 10th and 11th cantos and 12th cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which sometimes people say, oh, we don't read those, they're not Prabhupada's books. But my opinion is they're as much Prabhupada's books as before that, because who trained them to talk like that and have a perfect grasp of the Siddhanta and to be able to present it in the same mood that comes to the disciplic succession? It shines a light on the greatness of Prabhupada, that somebody was able to be there and continue that as Prabhupada asked him to do. And now, as birds at the end of the day go silent. Om Tat Sat. We have a few more points to make here, or I should say, Kaviraj Goswami does. So, if you don't mind, we'll keep reading for a little more. Is everyone okay?
Yes.
If we divide the tip of a hair into 100 parts and then take one part and divide this into another 100 parts, that 10,000th part is the dimension of the living entity. This is the verdict of the chief Vedic mantras. The first three padas of this verse from the Panchadashi Chitra Deepa are taken from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Lord Krishna says, among minute particles, I am the living entity. Purport, the living entity is one with and different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As spirit soul, the living entity is one in quality with the Supreme Lord. However, the Supreme Lord is bigger than the biggest, and the living entity is smaller than the small, is the smallest of the small. This quotation is the third pada of a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 11:16-11. O Lord, although the living entities who have accepted material bodies are spiritual and unlimited in number, if they were all pervading, there would be no question of their being under your control. If they are accepted, however, as particles of the eternally existing spiritual entity, as part of you, who are the Supreme Spirit whole, we must conclude that they are always under your control. If the living entities are simply satisfied with being identical with you as spiritual particles, then they will be happy being controllers of so many things. The conclusion is that the living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead are one and the same is a faulty conclusion. The conclusion is that the living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead are one and the same is a faulty conclusion. It is not a fact. That's from Bhagavatam, the Prayers to Personified Vedas. The unlimited living entities can be divided into two divisions, those that can move and those that cannot move. Among living entities that can move, there are birds, aquatics, and animals. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu is giving clear instructions on how the living entities live under different conditions. There are trees, plants, and stones that cannot move, but still they must be considered living entities or spiritual sparks. The soul is present in bodies like those of trees, plants, and stones. They are all living entities. Among moving living entities such as birds, aquatics, and animals, the same spiritual spark is there. As stated herein, there are living entities that can fly, swim, and walk. We must also conclude that there are living entities that can move within fire and ether. Living entities have different material bodies composed of earth, water, air, fire, and ether. The words Tara Madhya mean within this universe. The entire material universe is composed of 5 material elements. It is not true that living entities reside only within this planet and not within others. Such a conclusion is completely contradictory to the Vedas. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 2.24, Achejo yam atahyo yam akledyo shosya evacha nityak sarvagatastanu achalo yam sanatana. This individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble and can be neither burned nor dried. He is everlasting, present everywhere, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. The soul has nothing to do with the material elements. Any material element can be cut into pieces, especially earth. As far as the living entity is concerned, however, he can be neither burned nor cut to pieces. He can therefore live within fire. We can conclude that there are also living entities within the sun. Why should living entities be denied this planet or that planet? According to the Vedas, the living entities can live anywhere and everywhere, on land, in water, in air, and in fire. Whatever the condition, the living entity is unchangeable, sthanu. From the statements of Sri Caitanya Charitamrita, of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and the Bhagavad Gita, we are to conclude that living entities exist everywhere throughout the universes. They are distributed as trees, plants, aquatics, birds, human beings, and so on. Although the living entities known as human beings are very small in quantity, that division may be still further subdivided, for there are many uncultured human beings like mlechas, pulindas, baudas, and shabaras. Among human beings, there are those who are followers of the Vedic principles and considered civilized. Among these, almost half simply give lip service while committing all kinds of sinful activities against these principles. Such people do not care for regulative principles, the regulative principles. The word Veda means knowledge. Supreme knowledge consists of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead in our relationship with Him and acting according to that relationship. Action in accordance with the Vedic principles is called religion. Religion means following the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Vedic principles are the injunctions given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Aryans are civilized human beings who have been following the Vedic principles since time immemorial. No one can trace out the history of the Vedic principles set forth so that man might understand the Supreme Being. Literature or knowledge that seeks the Supreme Being can be accepted as a bona fide religious system, but there are many types of religious systems according to the place, the disciples, and the people's capacity to understand. The highest type of religious system is described in Srimad Bhagavatam 126, thus, Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktiratoksaje. The highest form of religion is that by which one becomes fully conscious of the existence of God, including His form, name, qualities, pastimes, abode, and all pervasive features. When everything is completely known, that is the perfection of Vedic knowledge. The fulfillment of Vedic knowledge is systematic knowledge of the characteristics of God. This is confirmed by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita 15:15. Vedaishcha sarver aham eva vedya. The sum of Vedic knowledge is to understand God. Therefore, those who are actually following Vedic knowledge and searching after God cannot commit sinful activities against the Supreme Lord's order. However, in this age of Kali, although men profess to belong to so many different kinds of religions, most of them commit sinful activities against the orders of the Vedic scriptures. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu therefore says herein, Veda nishada papa kare dharma nahi gane. In this age, men may profess a religion, but they actually do not follow the principles. Instead, they commit all kinds of sins. Among the followers of Vedic knowledge, most are following the process of fruitive activity and distinguishing between good and bad work. Out of many such sincere fruitive actors, there may be one who is actually wise. Purport: Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur states that the word karma nishta here refers to one who aspires to enjoy the results of his good work and pious activities. Some followers of Vedic principles offer everything to the absolute truth and do not aspire to enjoy the results of their pious actions. These are also considered among the karma nishtas. Sometimes we see pious men earn money with great hardship and then spend the money for some pious cause by opening public charities, schools and hospitals. Whether one earns money for himself or for the public benefit, he is called a karma nishta. Out of millions of karma nishtas, there may be one who is wise. Those who try to avoid fruitive activity and who become silent in order to merge into the spiritual existence of the absolute truth are generally known as jnanis, wise men. They are not interested in fruitive activity, but in merging into the Supreme. In either case, both the karma nishtas and the jnanis are interested in personal benefit. The karmis are directly interested in personal benefit within the material world, and the jnanis are interested in merging into the existence of the Supreme. The jnanis maintain that fruitive activity is imperfect. For them, perfection is the cessation of work and the merging into the Supreme existence. That is their life goal. That is their goal in life. The jnani wants to extinguish the distinction between knowledge, the knower, and the aim of knowledge. This philosophy is called monism, or oneness, and is characterized by spiritual silence. Out of many millions of such wise men, one may actually become liberated, mukta, and out of many millions of such liberated persons, a pure devotee of the Lord, Krishna, is very difficult to find. In Srimad Bhagavatam 10.232 it is said that due to their poor fund of knowledge, the jnanis are not actually liberated. They simply think that they are liberated. The perfection of knowledge culminates when one comes to the platform of knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaniti Shabdite. The Absolute Truth, Satya Vastu, is described as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Knowledge of impersonal Brahman and the Supersoul is imperfect until one comes to the platform of knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is therefore clearly said in this verse, Koti Mukti Madhya Dhulabha Ak Krishna Bhakta. Those who search after the knowledge of impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma are certainly accepted as liberated, but due to their imperfect knowledge, they are described in Srimad Bhagavatam as Vimuktamanina. Since their knowledge is imperfect, their conception of liberation is imperfect. Perfect knowledge is possible when one knows the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is supported by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Where do you think you would find such support? Which verse? 529. Everyone concur? Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatvam shantam rishi. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material existence. Pangs are not good. Research is going on for the karmis, jnanis, and yogis, but until the search is complete, no one can attain peace. Material pangs are not good. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says, Gyatva mam shantim richati. One can actually attain peace when he knows Krishna. This is described in the next verse. That's monumental, isn't it? Say yes.
Yes.
Because, here you go. Here's your verse. Krishna bhakta nishta ataiva shanta bhukti mukti siddhikami sakali ashanta. Because a devotee of Lord Krishna is desireless, he is peaceful. Fruit of workers desire material enjoyment, jnanis desire liberation, and yogis desire material opulence. Therefore they are all lusty and cannot be peaceful. Purport. The devotee of Lord Krishna has no desire other than serving Krishna. Even so-called liberated people are full of desires. Fruit of actors desire better living accommodations, and jnanis want to be one with the Supreme. Yogis desire material opulence, yogic perfections, and magic. All of these non-devotees are lusty, kami. Because they desire something, they cannot have peace. The peace formula is given by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita 5:29. Bhoktaram yagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantam rishyati. One who simply understands that throughout the entire universe, Krishna is the supreme enjoyer and beneficiary of all kinds of sacrifices, penances, and austerities, which should be performed only to attain his devotional service, that Krishna is the supreme being and thus the proprietor of all the material worlds, and that Krishna is the only friend who can actually do good to all living entities, Suridam Sarvabhutanam. One who understands these three principles about Krishna immediately becomes desireless, nishkama, and therefore peaceful. A Krishna Bhakta knows that his friend and protector in all respects is Krishna, who is able to do anything for his devotee. Krishna says, Konteya prajijanihi nami bhakta pranashyati. O son of Kunti, declare boldly that my devotee never perishes. Since Krishna gives this assurance, the devotee lives in Krishna and has no desire for personal benefit. The background for the devotee is the all-good himself. Why should the devotee aspire for something good for himself? His only business is to please the Supreme by rendering as much service as possible. A Krishna Bhakta has no desire for his own personal benefit. He is completely protected by the Supreme. Avashya Rakshibe Krishna Vishvas Palana. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that he is desireless because Krishna will give him protection in all circumstances. It is not that he expects any assistance from Krishna. He simply depends on Krishna just as a child depends on his parents. The child does not know how to expect service from his parents, but he is always protected nonetheless. That's interesting. It's better than interesting. It's inspiring. This is called nishkama, desirelessness. Although karmis, jnanis, and yogis fulfill their desires by performing various activities, they are never satisfied. A karmi may work very hard to acquire $1 million, but as soon as he gets $1 million, he desires another million. For the karmis, there is no end of desire. The more the karmi gets, the more he desires. The jnanis cannot be desireless because their intelligence is unsound. They want to merge into the Brahman effulgence, but even though they may be raised to that platform, they cannot be satisfied there. There are many jnanis and sannyasis who, after taking sannyas and giving up the world as false, return to the world to engage in politics or philanthropy, or to open schools and hospitals. This means that they could not attain the real Brahman, Brahma Satyam. They have to come down to the material platform to engage in philanthropic activity. Thus they again cultivate desires, and when these desires are exhausted, they desire something different. Therefore, the jnani cannot be nishkam, desireless, nor can the yogis be desireless, for they desire yogic perfections in order to exhibit some magical feats and gain popularity. People gather around these yogis, and the yogis desire more and more adulation. Because they misuse their mystic power, they fall down again to the material platform. It is not possible for them to become nishkam, desireless. The conclusion is that only the devotees who are simply satisfied in serving the Lord can actually become desireless. Therefore, Caitanya Mahaprabhu says here, Krishna Bhakta Nishkam, since the Krishna Bhakta, the devotee of Krishna, is satisfied with Krishna, there's no possibility of fall down. Ooh, this next verse is great. We'll have to read it. What do you think?
Yes.
Oh, all right. Muktaram apisiddhanam narayana parayana sadulabha prashantatma kutishvapi mahamune. What a great verse. Do you all like it?
Yes.
Scale of 1 to 10?
10.
Outside People's Party? Okay. O great sage, out of many millions of materially liberated people who are free from ignorance, and out of many millions of siddhas who have nearly attained perfection, there is hardly one pure devotee of Narayan. Only such a devotee is actually completely satisfied and peaceful. This verse is quoted from Srimad Bhagavatam 6.14.5. The Narayana Parayana, the devotee of Lord Narayan, is the only blissful person. One who becomes a Narayana Parayana is already liberated from material bondage. He already possesses all the perfections of yoga, unless one comes to the platform of Narayana Parayana and passes over the platform of Bhukti Mukti Siddhi. He cannot be fully satisfied. That is the pure devotional stage. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmanyadavritam anakulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktirutama. One who desires nothing but Krishna and who is not influenced by the process of Gyan Marg, cultivation of knowledge, actually becomes free from ignorance. A first-class person is one who is not influenced by karma, fruit activity, or yoga, mystic power. He simply depends on Krishna and is satisfied in his devotional service. According to Srimad Bhagavatam 6.17.28, Narayana parak sarvena kutaschana bibhyati, such a person is never afraid of anything. For him, heaven and hell are the same. Not knowing the situation of a Narayana Parayana, rascals become envious. By the grace of Narayan, a devotee is situated in the most opulent position in the material world. Rascals are envious of Narayan and his devotees, but the devotee endeavors to please another devotee of Narayan because he knows that by pleasing Narayan's representative, one directly pleases Lord Narayan. Therefore, a devotee offers the best comforts and facilities to his spiritual master. Outsiders who have no knowledge of Narayan are envious of both Narayan and his devotee. Consequently, when they see that Narayan's devotee is opulently situated, they become even more envious. But when the devotee of Narayan asks such foolish people to come live with him in the same comfortable situation, they do not agree because they cannot give up illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling. Therefore, the materialist refuses the company of a Narayana Parayana, although he is envious of the devotee's material situation. In Western countries, when ordinary men, storekeepers and workers, see our devotees living and eating sumptuously and yet not working, they become very eager to know where they get the money. Such people become envious and ask, how is it possible to live so comfortably without working? How is it you have so many cars, bright faces, and nice clothes? Not knowing that Krishna looks after his devotees, such people become surprised and some become envious. Haribol. Ooh. Brahmanda Brahmate Kom Bhagavan Jeev. We'll take a break. We'll come back here at 12:01. And we'll take it up again at Brahmanda Brahmate Kom Bhagavan Jeev. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.